Good morning, friends. The Arctic has been changing for a long time. Still, the last couple of years have brought changes that have shaken the structures in which we operate and collaborate to the core. In this session, organized by the project group Rethinking Arctic Collaboration, we will do just that, create scenarios on future scientific cooperation and diplomacy. My name is Ole Øvertveit, and I'm a researcher at the University of Bergen and the project manager of this UArctic financed project. And we have gathered a nice group of experts here today to discuss how the Arctic science and knowledge production can and should develop in the years and decades to come. We have Lisa Øverås, professor and president of the Norwegian Academy of Science and Letters, Gunn-Britt Retter, head of Arctic and Environmental Unit at the Sami Council, Henry Burgess, president of the International Arctic Science Committee, and we have Volker Rackold, head of the German Arctic office at Alfred Wegener Institute. And last but not least, Melody Birkins, director at the Institute of Arctic Studies at Dartmouth, whom I've asked to give an introduction to the topic before we move into the discussion. So please, Melody, the floor is yours.
This will be brief because I really want to have the conversation with everyone and with you. But thank you for being here. This whole project came from the leadership of the University of Bergen, who brought a lot of us together in, I think it was somewhere in the fall of 2023. They had just published their report, The Future of Science Diplomacy in the Arctic, and wanted to continue with this rethinking Arctic collaboration in this time of geopolitical tension, of challenges. What was it going to look like? And asked for funding from the University of the Arctic, UArctic. I'm also serve as the UArctic chair in science diplomacy and inclusion. And a lot of us, we came together, we proposed, and there was funding available for us, which we really appreciated. The project partners became the University of Bergen, Nord University, the Alfred Wegener Institute, Dartmouth, my home, International Center of Reindeer Husbandry, and the MacDonald-Laurier Institute, and then other partners started to come through as well. We had a first meeting in November of 2023 online. Really didn't know one another, and we started to plan what this would be. And I wanted to, I'll get into more, but there were diverse. We all immediately learned we were a diverse group with diverse perspectives. And if you have talked about these issues of the future of Arctic science cooperation, diplomacy, today and next year in this meeting at all, you have heard incredible diverse opinions, very strong opinions, people trying out new opinions. And really what we recognized in our own group was we needed to think about this and then learn from others. And it was really, we gave a first conversation in the Arctic Circle Assembly in Berlin. We all worked together and we listened to each other. And afterwards we actually met in a hotel cafe, as you do. And we developed our project further, and we actually learned we were going to rethink. We were going to start, our Arctic collaboration was going to rethink the Rethinking Arctic Collaboration, because we realized that what we were trying to do was maybe too immediate, too pressing, too personal. And how could we, so as we've evolved and thought, what we're recognizing we really want to talk to many of you in this room, some groups, we're continuing to have conversations at this conference. We want to hear more from others, but maybe think about, what is your vision for what Arctic collaboration, how do you rethink Arctic collaboration? Not next year and the year after, because that's, a lot of folks are working on that and it is very challenging. But what about the International Polar Year of 2032-33? What if we let people step back and envision what they hope for, what they think might change, good, bad, and actually capture those ideas? And that's really how our Rethinking Arctic Collaboration partnership has evolved. We're going to meet in Dartmouth, in Hanover, New Hampshire, in November to take some of all we've collected, put it together in a synthesis report, and share that back with the Arctic community. We want it to be a dialogue. We want it to be a conversation about how we see everyone, this collective of diverse opinions sees what we are trying to do by 2032-33 around science cooperation, around how diplomacy engages with that. So I look forward to our conversation. Thank you all for being here, and thanks to the audience for watching us have this conversation, and please ask us good questions.
Thank you very much, Melody. And you mentioned the many different opinions on Arctic collaboration and the future of Arctic science diplomacy. In one issue, I know there are very, very strong opinions, and it's making this discussion quite polarized. And that discussion how to cooperate with Russia and with Russian scientists. Can you give your thoughts and opinion on this issue, and not just where you want us to go, but what are the different camps and what are the different arguments that they're using?
Oh gosh, I don't even know if I can express all of them, and I'm sure there's more in this room than I can say, but it goes all the way from the idea that there should be, that science should not be in any way, shape, or form politicized. It should be so apolitical, so non-political, that no matter what happens in the world, and the Arctic was trying to model this Arctic exceptionalism, that there was free-flowing data no matter what, there was nothing to do with security or military, and that should continue. And we should maintain the Arctic as a zone of science cooperation, science engagement, free-flowing ideas, all the way to a concern of data being false, fake, bad information being shared, dual use of scientific appointments and exchanges, potential bad actors and human rights violations that should in fact inform why we had a pause, why Norway in its excellent chairship is slowly, carefully putting the Arctic Council into its working mode, but being thoughtful, testing the waters. I think you're hearing maybe my opinion, that slowly but surely looking at how ways that we really can build back trust, build our understanding, and thoughtfully what we can and cannot potentially collaborate on, but recognizing how powerful and important the Arctic Council is, how this knowledge sharing is important, but perhaps given the geopolitics, given the time, we need to be thoughtful in how we restructure that science cooperation. And there is everything in between. And it's really important to be hearing that. And then if you look out, that's happening now, looking out to 2032, 33, that's, to be honest, where I haven't, I mean, I'm hopeful and idealistic, but that's really where we want to hear some folks who are really embedded in this, in other parts, in science, in diplomacy, in NGOs, in governments. We want to hear what they're planning for and hoping for, and that's what we're hoping to report.
Thank you, Melody. And the war has made it has really disrupted the Arctic collaboration system. And that idea or that concept of trust building, I think also is crucial in the way that we move forward now. And I would use that also as a segue to you, Lise. You're a professor at the University of Bergen, but you also spend a quarter of the year on Svalbard as a professor at UNIS. And since the war, we have lost access to data from roughly half of the Arctic. Some see this as a significant problem, and others claim that we have enough knowledge, not least on climate change, and we need to move from studying and assessing to action. Can you comment on this, and also other sectors and other areas of Arctic science where the need for data and the need for knowledge might be larger than we think?
Yeah, I mean, I've been doing Arctic research for 25 years, and I've spent the summers in Svalbard, and I've looked into the permafrost, the methane gas emissions, and these kind of things, and also very basic science that we've been looking into the microbes in the permafrost and monitoring those things. And we did also through the university center, we had a very good collaboration with Russian scientists, and as long as more than 50% of the permafrost area are in Siberia, of course, this exchange of knowledge between Russian scientists and Norwegians were very important. And the thing that, I mean, what's the data we have per se, but the methods is improving, you're getting better analytical tools, and then you need the new data, you need updated versions of the data set. So we really see that we're lacking 50% of the gas fluxes coming out of the permafrost. So that really stopped some of the collaboration that we had. Also, some of my Russian colleagues are very good in systematics and classical biology disciplines. So also this communication and dialogue was stopped from one day to another. And of course, it was a vacuum in that sense. And it is, even though you could have this one-to-one collaboration, that really just, faded out. It was, in the beginning, it was a certain part of communication. But so there are huge knowledge gap now that, of course, we can continue to work on our sites and with our measurements and with our analysis, and we can interpolate it to what's happening there. But it's 50%. It's a lot. It's a huge data set and huge science community that we are not collaborating with, which makes the whole research strategy different from what it used to be. And it was, we were really ramping up. It was being quite good.
But just when you say different, what are the effects of different in the real world? Is it worse or is it just different?
That's difficult. Because it's worse. We can estimate in a different way. We can use artificial intelligence and think what's going on and all these things. But it is something with the research and the science that is this, science is becoming more and more international. And it's so fun to be part of this international network. And then you're suddenly losing. So I don't have a clear answer. I experience it as very different. And I think it's also sad.
Yeah. And we also talked about other areas that we have had good collaboration with Russia, not just on the climate issues and methane emissions and so on, but also for management and health issue, biohazards and health collaboration with Russia has also stopped. What do you think the effects of this might be in the long run?
I think we, as you said, I'm also president of the Norwegian Academy of Science and Letters, but I'm also vice president in the European Alliances of Academies. And we also see that science has become, again, more international. You really need to collaborate. The kind of benefit of collaborating with the academies is that you get really access to the best scientists in all these, in whole Europe. And then we realized in 2019 that there was a huge research gap or information gaps in understanding and responding to global health security risk from microbial threats in the Arctic. The permafrost is thawing, there is things happening. It was this outbreak of the anthrax in 2016 after the warmest summer ever, or not ever, but one of the most, the warmest summers and then it was a hypothesis that this was a carcass from reindeer that had anthrax, and that is this kind of just the beginning of a new era that is coming. So we had we had the workshop, and then we had with American academies and European academies, and a lot of indigenous people from the Arctic, and that was really the first step really to go into this, because we also see the change in climate, migration of animals, of different organisms, and then you have the pathogens colonizing new. So this is a huge new field that we have so much knowledge gap, and really important to continue. And that we were really ramping up to that, and we could see having the Russian scientists and the academies on board was really good, because they had knowledge that we could map with Canada and American Arctic. Yeah.
Thank you, Lisa. Gunn-Britt Retter, what these issues that Lisa is mentioning, both health collaboration and migrations of species and animals, might also be important from your perspective, and how has this new situation affected your work in knowledge and science collaboration from an indigenous perspective?
Yes, good morning, everyone. Maybe I start with my own organization, which is Sami Council, and one of the permanent participants to the Arctic Council. And we were established in 1956, and we are a kind of umbrella organization with today 9 member organizations. And in 1992, we were was completed by including 2 Sami associations from the Russian side as full members of Sami Council. And I had never thought that in my work career we would go from being united to be in a situation where we had to put this collaboration with our Russian side Sami organizations on hold as well. First, it was complicated because we couldn't transfer we didn't fund them directly, but we had a staff person on the Russian side. We couldn't transfer payment to her, or they couldn't travel. It was a pandemic as well. So it's becoming many years now that we haven't been able to work with them. So what this leads to is that you mentioned gaps in knowledge, but it's also gaps in understanding and knowing what is happening on the ground with indigenous peoples and their health and the environment at all. We also had a project under the Arctic Council, which was cleanup of waste on the Kola Peninsula, which we could not complete in the manner that we were planning. So yeah. But we have some normalization as well, as when Norway took over the chairship of the Arctic Council, the permanent participants, the 6 organizations that are recognized in the structure of the Arctic Council, has been able to meet 3 times. So that has been while the working groups are slowly getting up and going, also the permanent participants, the indigenous organizations, have been able to meet and start up our work. So I feel that is some normalization, but not so much science projects yet, if I can put it that way. But I also have to say that I'm active on the UN arena and international fora. There we have also been able to meet representatives of indigenous peoples from the Russian side. So I'm happy that we have some arenas where we can collaborate. But that didn't probably answer your question at all, but that's what...
No, absolutely, it definitely did. And also, what are the... when you look forward into the, as Melody mentioned, the longer perspective, how do you see the Arctic science collaboration, knowledge collaboration structure develop? And what would you like to see from your point of view? What do we need?
Yes, I agree with both Lisa and Melody here that the concern of the big knowledge gap that Russia represents, and if we don't get data from, is it almost half of the Arctic, how do we then understand the Arctic and the changes in the Arctic, and also for the people living in the Arctic areas in Russia? And I have heard many people say that, yeah, we need to, and I think that is important, that we need to retain the personal contacts and with scientists, like Lisa also said. But what we also feel with our indigenous Sami brothers and sisters is that there are laws in Russia, in particular for indigenous peoples, that puts them in risk, security risk, if they engage with us. And I think it's a bit, while we need to keep personal connections with indigenous peoples and also the scientists, we might also put individuals at risk. So I think it's safer to try to have formal cooperation. We might face like false data or bad data, but, and what we said, me and Melody were on the same page, so to say, in our seminar the other day, that the climate crisis and the loss of nature and the nature crisis are also so huge crises that I think we need to be pragmatic in finding ways to have formal cooperation, even though the war is still warm and hot.
Thank you. Henry, you are leading the process towards the 5th International Polar Year. And how has the war influenced the work with the IPY? And how will Russia participate in the IPY without actively collaborating with other partners? And can we envision an International Polar Year without Russian participation?
Yeah, thank you very much. I should say at the outset that the planning for the International Polar Year is very much a collaborative effort, absolutely, between the International Arctic Science Committee, the Scientific Committee on Antarctic Research, the International Science Council, and the WMO, and many, many other partners as well, including indigenous representative organisations. So it's very much a team effort, but I'm happy to speak about it here. Yes, we started the IPY thinking process in 2021, so before Russia's invasion of Ukraine. And we started that because we knew that we wanted to give ourselves as much time as possible between 2032 to plan effectively, to be as inclusive as possible, to listen to what people would like to focus on, what the priorities are, to connect with funders and nations and international organizations and make it a real success. Because this polar year, the one in 32, 33, will only be 25 years after the last one. They've usually been 50 years apart. But we recognize that the pace, the depth, the breadth of change in the Arctic and the Antarctic is so rapid that it was time to do it in 25 years rather than the usual 50. But equally, the potential for what there was with the IPY was much greater as well. So different observing systems, much better but not perfect awareness of the links between science and indigenous knowledge and the responsibilities there. And so we wanted to do it as quickly as we could, but give ourselves enough time to plan it properly. It is difficult. Within the International Arctic Science Committee, we were formed in 1990 to facilitate and encourage all forms of Arctic science across all forms of all regions of the Arctic. We have 24 members. Russia is a member, a founder member, and is still a member now. And yet Russia is not participating to any very large degree within the processes of IASC. They are able to. There is no restriction on their ability to participate other than financial responsibilities because of the sanctions that affect us and where we are hosted. But there is no restriction on their ability to participate within IASC. But to be frank and open, they are choosing not to, more or less. There's some small connection that we have, and we value that greatly. Because we miss our Russian colleagues. The whole reason to create IASC was to promote genuine international cooperation across the Arctic. So we miss our Russian friends and colleagues, and we particularly miss those early career researchers where those links were so important to make. And IASC we're not a big organization, but we have a certain amount of money to spend, and we've often focused that on early career researchers, on fellowships. So we really miss those connections. I hope because the International Science Council and the WMO and other UN agencies are so closely connected, and I'm really pleased that they are to IPY, we will find a way through that mechanism to begin to open some of these discussions with Russian colleagues, to find the best way for them to contribute to the International Polar Year. But we will have to proceed at the pace of kind of trust within the organization. So I'm still optimistic. The fact that the Arctic Council has been able to resume a good amount of its practical work within the working groups, the fact that Russian institutions and agencies are providing data through the UN, weather data and other things, all of that is still there, IMO, all of that is still there. So I think we will get there, and I'm really glad that we started as early as we did, because we've given ourselves the best chance to take advantage of good things when they happen. But there is, and I'll take my IASC hat off, and I'll put my UK hat on. There is one simple solution to the fact that Russia is not able to engage in international science organizations, and that lies with Russia.
Yeah.
And I'll put my IASC hat back on.
Yeah, I think we all agree on that on this panel. But following up a bit on that also, that the role that diplomacy has, science has had in diplomacy, track 2 diplomacy has proved valuable in resolving tense situations previously. And can science diplomacy play a more active role in building bridges in the situation we are facing now, and especially the previous IPIs, some of them have brought the world of science together across barriers and borders and in real troubled times. And how do you see the International Polar Year, the 5th, do that?
You were asking me?
No, I'm still.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry.
There was just follow-up question.
I'm sorry. Would you summarise again, Ola? Sorry, I'm so sorry. Totally my fault.
No, I was just asking. The track 2 diplomacy has proved important in building bridges across great divides and high walls. How can science play that role also in this situation, and how can the IPY facilitate bridge building?
Yes, thank you. One of the really wise things I think I've heard over the last couple of days is from John Holdren in the first session on the first day. And he gave 3 or 4 really, really good examples of how, as a young man and other young colleagues he knew, he met Russian, Soviet colleagues at that time and formed very strong scientific bonds with no sense of political connection or expected effect politically. He formed a proper, genuine science bond with people who he didn't know were going to be really important in the future, and yet he was really important in the future, and they were really important in the future, and that enabled him and them to make some personal connection, but to have trust in each other and to take some kind of science decisions, but that had good political and practical effects. And I think that would be a really good thing we could do with the IPY, is to focus as much as we can on early career and connections, because you might back some people when it doesn't work out, okay, fine, but you might also back some people who will turn in to be the people who will be taking really important decisions in a few years' time. And what I would really like to do, and this is a personal view, but others might share it too, is to make sure that the International Polar Year focuses on the science, and that we hope and expect that by getting the right science priorities and getting the right science involved, and the funders and the countries too, we get some real good effects from the International Polar Year. And we have a great tradition going all the way back to the first one of success, so we can be confident it will be successful. But if we load the International Polar Year down with political or diplomatic objectives, we cripple it from the start, because there are other ways of doing that political and diplomatic work. If we focus on the science, then the diplomacy will come as a result of that. That's my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you. Volker, Germany recently launched its new Arctic strategy. It highlights security, stability, and the rule of law in the Arctic. And Germany seeks collaboration within the Arctic Council, but less so with Russia. How will you do that?
That's a good question. I mean, first of all, I completely agree with what Henry said, but I think there are some boundary conditions that we have to keep in mind. And if you mention or refer to the German policy guidelines, they clearly state that Germany does not consider Russia a partner in science at the moment. It says that German science will relocate and work with like-minded partners, and that's already happened. I mean, we had a long, long history with working in Russia. I started my career working in Russia in the 90s. I did 10 expeditions to Russia. I speak Russian, so I have many Russian friends, of course. And of course, this was a dramatic change for us. And overnight, we had to relocate our projects and many scientific activities from Russia to Canada, to Alaska, to Scandinavia. But that is a thing that we had no choice, because it was the politics in Germany that said there is no cooperation with Russia on an institutional level anymore. And that is the thing we probably have to accept. We cannot move around that. So, and that also, of course, affects the planning of the IPY. So, at the moment, it's hard for me to believe how it should work. Because IPY typically has international projects. So they have a Norwegian component, a Canadian component, a Russian and a German component. And in the current setting, with the current regulations that we have in Germany, our scientists could not participate in such a project if there's a Russian component. It simply wouldn't work. And that's the thing, I mean, we still have 10 years to find a way to solve that, but we have to keep that in mind when we think about the planning of the IPY. And of course, an IPY without Russia, in my view, would not work. Because the IPY is international, and all the IPYs, the last ones, they were all had a very strong Russian component. I mean, the best example that's always referred to is the IPY, or the IGY actually, 57, 58, that was more focused on the Antarctic when SCAR was created. And then, of course, that's a prime example for science diplomacy, of course, the Antarctic Treaty. And I think we need, for many activities, we need the Russian science, but also the Russian logistics are extremely important. And in that context, I just recall the Mosaic expedition that the Avi did some years ago when our icebreaker Polarstern was frozen in the sea ice for 1 year, during the pandemic actually. Yeah? And then the other icebreakers that were supposed to help and support the Swedish icebreaker and the Chinese couldn't do it due to the pandemic, but the Russian icebreakers helped. Yeah? So without Russia, the whole project would have collapsed, actually. But with Russian support, they could finalize the project. So I think that is another example that shows how important that Russian contribution for an IPY would be. But nevertheless, we have some political boundary conditions that we simply have to accept, and that we have to find a way, I don't know, to solve it.
Yeah. I want to move a bit back to the Arctic Council. Melody, Russia is, the Arctic Council is operating on a working group level with also with Russia. But how do you see the Arctic Council developing, and how will the Arctic Council maintain its role as the center of Arctic collaboration, and not least as the driving force in setting the Arctic agenda?
Mm-hmm. It's a big question. Thank you for that. That's what we're hoping to talk to quite a few folks on. But in my own personal thinking, again, I think the Norwegian chairship has set an excellent model for an unprecedented illegal invasion of Ukraine caused an unprecedented pause, and so everyone has been trying to work on this. They strategized the ministerial transition through obviously deft diplomacy. They've managed this chairship very well. As I said, I appreciate how Volker mentioned it's those boundary conditions. In stepping through these boundary conditions to give people continue the trust that is built in the Arctic Council, to have the Arctic Council walk carefully, first through virtual discussions, then through written, then virtual, I think is how it's gone. And also thinking about, the Arctic Council has also pointed out there are places that our collaboration are having on, or it's been a voice for the narrative. I've heard of, still there's search and rescue conversations. There's still conversations on some high-level security issues, obviously outside the Arctic Council, but there are still conversations going on that the Arctic Council can listen to, and people involved in the Arctic Council can listen to. So I see, as the Arctic Council continues, it is the people who live there. Therefore, it must be the voice of the Arctic. I think it needs to keep that narrative. The Arctic Council is the communities, the indigenous and non-indigenous residents of the Arctic. They should have the first say of how the future of their region goes and choose their partners. And I think this sequential recognizing what is a next step, what may next be how we work together and continue to build that trust with boundary conditions. And there may be countries that can do it and cannot do it, and that's important to respect as well. But I think the Arctic Council laying out this roadmap and being in charge of how this works does give it, it is that authority. Other groups will try to invite everyone, but they are not the people of the Arctic. They do not represent or know or understand the history of the Arctic, or have the permanent participants bring such a different understanding of authority and voice and equity and ethical engagement that I've not seen in any other forum on Earth. And so I want the Arctic Council to continue to be strong, but I am understanding to me that it will need to take it carefully, slowly, to keep trust within its partnerships and to see what Russia will do. And I appreciate Henry's comment of there is an answer here, and it is in their hands. The two other quick things I will say, though, are that things that the Arctic Council can do. There's gaps in understanding the permafrost and other issues that are in Russia. We've always had a gap in understanding how to work with indigenous knowledge and indigenous rights. The Arctic Council has had many decades of it, but we still need to learn how to connect. It was only in the Fairbanks Science Agreements in 2017 that sort of said we should also, understand indigenous knowledge contributions. We need to do more. That's a gap. There's a current gap that we can look at now. The other one is I think the Arctic Council and the nations of the Arctic and the peoples of the Arctic a lot of them have said, we're not the ones who started this climate crisis. It happened elsewhere. Some nations, are obviously the US included, are part of this, but many of the nations weren't. So we can also be a voice for what is really science is important in the climate crisis, but to be honest, we need to get politicians and funders stopping the release of greenhouse gases from fossil fuels, moving to low carbon transitions immediately. And that's not something the scientists can do, but scientists have been informing this. The Arctic Council has been informing this for decades. Now is the time to make that action. As we're getting ready for science in the IPY, we do have the pressure, we do have the authority to ask politicians and funders to move to a much different type of future, a low carbon economy for our planet and for the Arctic.
Thank you, Melody. And I would like to hear your thoughts on this also, Gunn, the importance of the Arctic Council for you and as a platform for voice from the indigenous community. And also, if you would like to share with us, what are with the less visible Arctic Council, are there other forces, other actors moving into the Arctic scene that might be taking over the agenda setting in the region?
Yeah, there's a lot of Norwegians. No, that was a joke. In case you didn't get it. For Sami Council, it's no doubt that Arctic Council is the most important fora for collaboration, and we value that so much because, first and foremost, because we have such a strong and recognized position at the table, and there is no Arctic Council without indigenous peoples there. And I couldn't agree more with Melody on how she was referring it, and I'm glad she said that. I didn't need to. But I also want to take this opportunity to say that the Arctic indigenous peoples met first time in 1973 in the Christiansborg in Copenhagen to discuss common concerns for their homelands, which were Arctic. So when the Arctic Environmental Protection Strategy started to this Arctic collaboration among states started to move, the indigenous peoples were very ready. They had already in '73 agreed that we needed an arena to meet and discuss our issues. So when the Arctic states started to create this for our wise leaders back then, they were so ready to knock on the door and say, hey, you're talking about our homelands and our lands and our issues, so we need to be at the table. And with some, maybe some vodka and some dried meat was involved, and we got some diplomats on our side, and we got the seat at or recognition to have the seat at the table. And I think we have proven over these years the importance and of the indigenous peoples being at the table, and also that we are responsible actors that can deliver particularly on the indigenous knowledge at the table. But I would also, I've already forgot the question, but I would also draw the attention to one really good development that Norway has brought to the table together with particularly one of the permanent participants, Gwitchin Council International, on the wildfires, which at first was not on the planning. But with this situation, I think it was a very brilliant idea to try to find an issue that was very urgent, but common for all, common challenge and issue for all the countries or Arctic states, and with the indigenous peoples having very specific knowledge and experience with wildfires. So I think that was a very smart diplomatic move to identify wildfires as one activity that we could focus on.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, I think we will leave the floor open for questions from the audience. We have one there.
Thank you very much. My name is Hans van der Loo from Blue Cooling. I would like to say that I completely agree with the sanctions on Russia, but I do not think we have done them in a very intelligent way, because both climate and future interests demonstrably suffer. We, as the minority interest group of the currently living, do we actually have the right to be so reckless? And I actually refer to three people in the panel. On the one hand, Henry's position that we should cooperate as scientists, Volker's position or Germany's position that we shouldn't, and actually maybe the wisdom maybe from Koen Britt, because actually the Sami people, they look at themselves as one people, and some have Finnish passports, and some Norwegian, and some Swedish, and some Russian passports. So my question is, isn't the ongoing connection between science and diplomacy, or as Henry put it, just the science and diplomacy will follow, necessary to actually come out of the conflict? Because otherwise we would be icy silos that are like frozen statues that do not come any forward. Can we actually afford not to progress even in times of conflict?
Thank you. Henry, would you like to start answering that?
Yeah, I'm not sure I recognise how you've characterised what I said, but no one is happy with where we are at the moment. You know, Russia isn't happy, in the international organisations are not happy, the UK isn't happy, this is not anywhere where we want to be. And yet the reality is that science takes money and trust and commitment. And that money and trust and commitment is inextricably linked to kind of national priorities. You know, British researchers spend British taxpayers' money when they do research. So it's inevitable that in the current situation that will be different, and we have to recognise that. It doesn't mean that we can't and shouldn't continue to have these individual connections. We shouldn't think about, in something like the International Polar Year, what we can do differently in the future. But we work with the reality of where we are, and I don't think it's worth our time to try and kick that apart now. We should just think about, through opportunities like the International Polar Year, how we can begin to kind of shift the dial. But it will need to shift politically before it shifts meaningfully scientifically.
Volker, would you like
I wanted to add one thing anyway, so that which relates to what you asked. I didn't want to leave the impression that the scientists believe this is all wrong. I think the majority of the scientific community understands that it's impossible to work with Russia at the moment, at least on a, let's say, official level or institutional level. But still, of course, the contact, and we have these contacts and dialogues on personal level, is still continuing. But it's a more complex issue. I mean, also the science in Russia, of course, is very much affected by what's happening there. Yeah? And that is the thing we have to worry about. So how can we work with scientists in Russia when it's risky for them, even to talk to them? Yeah? So, and also in the Russian scientific community, we have colleagues who very much support what is happening in Ukraine. That makes it also very, very difficult, of course. So this is the issue is a bit more complex than just saying yes or no. Yeah? So we have to keep all these kind of things in mind, and that's. I mean, we still have quite some time until the IPY, but we need to have all these things in mind and how we plan it. And as I said, I believe an IPY without Russia is it's only half of the IPY. Yeah.
Gimlet.
Yeah, very well observed. And I just wanted to add to that there are 6 permanent participant organizations in the Arctic Council. 4 of them have citizens on the Russian side. So it's Inuit on the other end, and also the Aleut and the Ripon itself, of course, and Sami Council that have brothers and sisters on the Russian side. Yeah, just to add that.
But Maybe you might want to add about Reykjavík. I mean, Reykjavík is a very, very special story because Reykjavík was the first organization from indigenous peoples saying that we very much support our president. Yeah, they had a statement, but that has something to do with the leadership of Reykjavík, which was completely replaced by the Russian government to follow their line, actually. And that is a very difficult thing, I guess, for Reykjavík, right, Gunnar?
Yeah, I don't need to say it was already said.
Good point. Thank you for that question. And we have one here.
Remarkable expressions. So my question is, in the context, somebody in one of these sessions here gave thanks to Russia, actually, because NATO now has 2 more nations in it. The agenda of NATO is expanding. Hybrid war has become more and more of a topic within the framework of NATO. So, somebody also made the point is that science is able to go 9 billion miles away and get specific data from some constellation that nobody ever knew existed before. And so perhaps the responsibility is upon us to expand and enhance our capabilities to be able to take determinations of what is going on in and below the Arctic, maritime Arctic, and other kinds of scientific questions until a mass murder of people stops. I think to allow for my personal view, to allow for no meaningful response to an unprovoked invasion is not a good idea, not for the Arctic, not for the world. And I take your point about individual communications, etc. I also take your point that people are put at risk when they are communicating outside of the allowed for orb. And I don't think, well, thank you. I guess what I wonder is, what do you think?
Volker?
I can only go back to what I said about the boundary conditions, and I think we're scientists. We have instructions in Germany. We have instructions from our ministry, which is financing us, and of course the instructions is there is no institutional cooperation with Russia at the moment. The policy guidelines, they also say, of course, we are ready to reopen that anytime if the situation is appropriate and if it changes. But that's the thing we are just we have to adhere to. So we don't have so many options. Yeah.
Melody.
And I will just say I appreciate the idea that in a time of challenge, there are often, you're looking at what you're missing, and I'm not saying that that's not a huge loss, and that we should be discussing the loss of that access and that data. But I do appreciate the turn to, and look how, not on the, I won't say it on the military side, but just how the trust has been very strong of the indigenous peoples continue to work together. And the 7 Arctic nations it's a strong alliance that is deep, and we would love to have our partners back after there's maybe some different political changes. But in the meantime, there are so many things that we can do. There's so many things that we can do together that we haven't yet done. So we have to focus on hopefully the future and being all together again. But until then, there is so much that we have power to do. It's not all a lost discussion or narrative. There is so much we can do together to prepare for IPY, all these other questions that we have. And we hope Russia is listening and can do them as well and share data with us in a different way and in collaboration once we can do that. But we can move forward, we can lead, we can put these ideas in practice, we can study these issues in the territory that we have and move forward.
Thank you, Melody. We have one question here.
Thank you very much. Sheikh Al-Mazrou'i from Abu Dhabi Research Council. It's my first time to attend the Arctic Circle. I'm very amazed on the efforts built here to see how we can solve the issue as we can. I have 2 questions. One of my questions, which I don't know if the Arctic Council is already doing. As the non-Arctic countries, but partner of the Arctic as a global partners, I know that there is a lot of countries is very much looking to support the Arctic cycle because what is happening globally is really affecting everyone in the world. And with indirect or by direct way, we are affecting the climate change and the global warming. So Is there any ideas or is there any existing models or system for global funds to support research? Because I know research is very expensive and there is a lot of funds need to be done to support. So is the council working on doing a global research fund that could be allocated to support research? And is there any philanthropy system? I know a lot of people who lost their beloved people during natural disasters due to climate change would love to donate to support the research on this regard. Marathons all over the world where that marathon would support the Arctic Circle. And my last question, so the first question, the global fund, and the other question is how to engage with the global partners in terms of research. I know that there is a lot of international countries where they are having good research facilities and infrastructure. I would speak about the UAE as a country. We have a good research facility in terms of autonomous robotics, AI, genomics. Myself, I came from a good background of genomics, where we are utilizing the CAT research age in genomics and AI. So I would love if someone can let me know how this can be really engaged effectively.
Thank you. Henry, maybe you would like to comment on the global funds or finance for science?
I'll say a little bit, perhaps. Thank you for your question. This is not a closed shop. So 2/3 of our members within the International Arctic Science Committee are non-Arctic countries. Similar proportion, even greater proportion in the Antarctic world. So it's absolutely not a closed shop. We are open to new members. Any country that's doing Arctic research is very welcome to apply. Our doors are wide open to other people to apply. And the International Polar Year as a whole is genuinely international. The International Science Council, the UN agencies, anyone can contribute to the International Polar Year. Well, there isn't one. I don't think there will be a single International Polar Year fund that everyone contributes to and everyone pulls out. So I think that will be, even with the amount of time we have, I think that's a step too far. But there is an organisation called the Arctic Science Funders Forum, and we had an informal meeting yesterday, and that brings together lots of the countries who have an interest in funding Arctic science to think about how we can better collaborate together. That forum is potentially open to anyone that would like to contribute. And again, we're not going to try and smash everything together in one fund, but there are really good examples of how countries can work together and how they can access international funds kind of with a priority on the Arctic. So it's lots of other good thoughts. But
if you want to comment on the infrastructure.
I mean, I agree. It's not one big fund, but there are quite a few of smaller funds and a lot of infrastructure that is already out there. I mean, there's a lot of activity going on, a lot of things to apply, and also international collaboration. But what we are kind of facing today is this. I mean, we're missing an important contributor into this. But it's both. I mean, Norwegians, we had a big project for 7 years in the Nansen Legacy to really get data into this, and we're now planning a continuation. And also the Mosaic that was mentioned here before was a big international research project. So there are a lot of things going on at the moment. So we are keeping up the process on this, but but not one big that will unite everybody.
Okay, I think that's the last question that we have time for. Our time is running out now, so I would just like to say that this has been an interesting and good discussion. Thank you all panelists, and we are taking the inputs and the knowledge from these discussions and your questions with us in our work further. Folke, Henry, Gunwit, Lisa, Melody, thank you. Thank you, Arctic Circle, for letting us have this event here. And thank you all for coming and joining us in this discussion this morning. Thank you.